We will discuss today an intriguing idea: teaching mathematics with comics. This may be specially justified in the context of rising rates of school failure and the traditional perception of math as a difficult subject among students. Recognizing that students often prefer visual material over text, combining images, text, and pedagogical methods through the use of comic strips can be an effective solution. Comics, also known as sequential art, combine literature with graphic narrative, being one of the most expressive means of contemporary culture. The interpretation of comics is conditioned by individual experience, memory, and context, which gives it specific meanings that correspond to established cultural conventions, forming a visual language made up of signs. These signs are stimuli that evoke a mental image and are related to each other by similarity or cultural convention, allowing for visual communication. Charles Sanders Peirce, an American philosopher from the second half of the 19th century, classified signs according to their relationship with the referent into symbols, icons, and indices. Symbols are related to a referent by convention and cultural experience, while icons resemble the stimulus they evoke, and indices have a more physical connection to the object mentioned. In comics, a sequence of iconic physical images can become a narrative, accompanied by written elements that give them narrativity and meaning. The origins of comics cannot be discussed until image and text were used in an integrated manner. In the early days, text was merely an accompaniment to the image. However, several pioneers invented a medium that united image and text inseparably, including James J. Gilray, Rudolf E. Topfer, Wilhelm Busch, and Las Ockes. The first modern comic as we know it today was created in 1985 by Richard F. Outcault with his character the Yellow Kid. This comic featured consecutive images to tell a story, a consistent character throughout the series, and integrated text within the images. The commercial success of the Yellow Kid led other newspapers and press to include comics in their pages, and as the consumption of comics grew, authors adapted their stories to please the audience, leading to the creation of genres in comics, including detective, adventure, superheroes, and graphic novels. Before digital media existed, comics were a common resource to entertain children. They make it easy to understand the relationship between image and word and the traditional decoding of text. Through comics, learning to read is not only about reading words, but also about deciphering symbols, information, integration, and organization, making it a perceptual activity. Therefore, reading becomes a two-pronged act that works on both aesthetic perception and intellectual recreation, demanding the reader's visual and verbal faculties. The fundamental elements in modern comic strips or comic books are the panel, which separates and analyzes the images that make up the total enunciation, and the speech bubble, which captures the representation of sound and speech, making it useful for describing time. Human figures and body language are essential elements in comic art. The reading of human postures or gestures is an acquired skill that most humans possess, more than they realize, from childhood. Postures alert us to danger or protection. We must distinguish between gesture and posture. A gesture tends to be subtle and limited to a narrow range of movements that the reader will later judge as appropriate or inappropriate. A posture is a movement selected from all those that constitute a single action. Gestures can have a more ambiguous meaning. To distinguish between them, we look at the face, specifically the eyebrows, lips, jaw, eyelids, and cheeks, all of which respond to muscle movements that help us better understand what the artist wants to convey. Additionally, the face is the part of the body that best supports the word. The written conception and composition of a comic story are affected by the medium's limitations that determine the story's scope and depth of narration. When designing or analyzing a comic with instructional or educational purposes for mathematics, we should take into account the following elements. The human body seen as a mechanical device with a limited range of movements, and we must understand what it can and cannot do for its operation. Perspective. Perspective refers to the distance, relationship of one form to another, its configuration, and its size. Light shadow. Light coming from its source appears as a water jet. The absence of light is darkness. An object that intercepts a light beam is dark on the opposite side to where it receives light. Objects or people illuminated by the same light cast a shadow on what is behind them, whether it is a wall, the ground, or any other object. Shadows adapt to the surface of the form they fall on. The use of light creates an emotional effect. Shadows provoke fear, while light denotes safety. Objects. Objects are usually machines that range from a simple empty box to a car, and all have a limited range of operational capacity. Mechanisms. Readers know that each mechanism has its functioning, and they will reject an incorrect drawing. Gravity. Gravity is widely used in narrative and is universally understood. Fabrics. Clothes on an object or worn by a person respond to vertical pull of gravity, and their response to that force depends on the shape of the object that supports it. Caricature. Caricature is the result of exaggeration and simplification. Realism is fidelity to details. Retaining details gives credibility, as what is drawn resembles what the reader sees every day. Composition. Each panel is like a stage where a configuration of elements takes place. These elements should be placed with a specific purpose in mind. In a panel, nothing should be accidental or the result of carelessness. The detail or action that is most important should be emphasized and placed in the area of greatest attention. Balloons. The different types and uses of balloons offer a wide range of possibilities. Visual versus illustration. Drawings in comics are visual and replace text. In textbooks, they are illustrations. The visual substitutes for the text, while the illustration limits itself to repeating or amplifying, decorating, or creating an atmosphere. The comic artist's job is to draw and not to illustrate. There is a relationship between comics and mathematics, in the sense that they can be used for educational purposes and not just entertainment. Comics can help students develop their analytical skills, identify elements that define kinematic codes and their different types, combine group, individual, critical, and creative work techniques and oral and written expression abilities. Enable students to produce comics instead of just consuming stories. Help children acquire codes that will accompany them throughout their lives. Develop reading habits. Enhance communication possibilities. Serve as a tool for reading comprehension exercises. Provide exercises that stimulate analysis and synthesis methods. Develop students' logical thinking. Adapt to any level and topic. Help overcome reading and writing difficulties. Serve as a short and secure path towards books. In comics, mathematical jokes seem to be targeted to a mathematical audience. However, graphic humor is an efficient teaching resource for mathematics. Humor has three main functions: intellectual, affective, and pedagogical. Humor helps students relate to mathematical vocabulary, concepts, common mistakes, and frequent representations. Other uses include creating humorous posters for the classroom or inventing math jokes to learn math, aiming to abandon the grim image of mathematics and achieve a more useful and enjoyable learning teaching process. Creating a comic with instructional or educational purposes for mathematics requires careful planning and execution. The human machine, perspective, light and shadow, objects and mechanisms, gravity, fabrics, caricature, composition, balloons, and visual versus illustration are essential elements to consider. With the right approach, comics can serve as an effective teaching tool to help students develop their analytical skills, identify kinematic codes, and combine group, individual, critical, and creative work techniques, while enhancing communication possibilities and developing logical thinking. I hope you found this video useful. If that is the case, please support me by pushing that big fat subscribe icon.